White Plume Mountain was originally published in 1979 by TSR and was written by Lawrence Stick. This is a 16-page adventure that has been a classic funhouse dungeon right from the start. A sequel, Return to White Plume Mountain, was done in 1999, and in 2005 it got a conversion to 3.5 rules. More recently, in 2017, you'll find the 5th edition version in Tales of the Yawning Portal. Now, this module was written by Lawrence as a My Best Dungeons, compiled all together, then sent into TSR as a job application. They looked at it and went, "This is great, we'll just publish it as is," even though it was never actually meant to be as is. And it's been a great dungeon that people have loved ever since. It's been used in competition modules, which has changed kind of how it's been run if you're looking at inserting it into your game. And when I usually run it for my characters, sort of a short adventure, I don't try and usually incorporate into my current campaign. Dungeon Magazine ranked it 9th out of its top 30 adventures in 2004, a list that needs an updating. And it was also turned into a novel by Paul Kidd, where this ranger called the Justicar, human fella, had a sentient hellhound skin that he wore. He teamed up with Ascala the Fairy and Polk the Teamster as they went down into this dungeon. It is a fantastic kickoff to a 3-part book series that carries those characters through, and absolutely fantastic. Going to chuck some affiliate links down there for some of you who want the book, the game, the novel, all that sort of stuff. So check that down below. But now we need to talk about the story. So what's happened? What is the hooks? So 3 legendary weapons have been taken. Could have been from churches, could have been from lords, arcane mages, whatever, and they can't be found. We can't figure out how they were stolen. All that was left was a poem challenging people to come back and collect the weapons. And the stamp at the end was the seal of Caraptus, a wizard thought long dead for centuries. I had to go look it up and try and figure out what the go is. Here's my tweak, what I want to do. I want to make this have happened about 20 days ago. And these organizations who own the weapons privately sent out guards, private mercenaries, all that sort of stuff to try find these weapons, but to no avail so far, or no one's returned. Since then, the thing's been letterbombed. It's everywhere. It's in all the towns, it's in all the churches, and all the pubs, on all the bulletin boards, on everything. It's everywhere, and everyone knows about it. And now, these high lords, churches, mage guilds, and such, are scrambling to try and get someone who they can contract in to go and find these items before who knows who gets them. This works really well for a couple of things. Number one, it can change your random encounters to be other parties, which can be interesting. And it can also build a mechanic so that if one of your characters dies and can't be resurrected, they could pick up a new player, or the last player of a party that got ahead of them and all died, and now that person now joins the group that they're in. So a twofold situation there, benefit for doing that. Now, depending on how you roleplay these encounters, they could simply be, if the group decide to all go to sleep, the other group might just try and sneak past them while they're taking a long rest and try to do the dungeon ahead of them. Or potentially they could come screaming, running away, fleeing the thing that the party are about to walk into. They could just meet each other and just instantly start fighting amongst themselves because they want the treasure over the current party. Or they could be leaving. If you've run out of time in your adventure and you just don't have time to do one of the whole wings, they could be leaving and the group could find them and then decide if are they going to roleplay, are they going to bargain, buy the item off them, or are they going to fight each other to the death to try and get the other magic items each other group has. It could make a whole nother dynamic. It could make this dungeon just that little bit more interesting. Some areas I would consider putting these group meetups could be in areas 3 or 5. Where they've been worn down by the acid or they've failed the golem puzzle and fled. Another one is the group could have gone invisible and sneaked past the area ghouls in area 20. And they could have also lost someone in the frictionless room on the far side. There could be a dead body tucked down there if you put them there. And then you could find the group trying to rest between areas 26 and 23 in that hallway there. And there might have been 1 or 2 left of them. In which case they might join the party if you're looking for extra new PCs to join in all of a sudden. Great for step in, step out sort of gameplay. This means you could be after some extra encounters and you'd be looking for some stats for some of these NPCs if you're going to use them to fight with. If you're looking for a single NPC and the rest of his group have all died, you're probably looking something along the lines of an Archmage, Archdruid, Warlord, or War Priest. They're pretty reasonable to go up against the group as is for the level they're assessed at. If you're looking at 2 party members are remaining or sneaking in, you could be looking at a Warlock of the Fiends, a Master of Thieves, a Mage, or a Gladiator. And for larger parties, potentially you could be looking at Knights, Warlock of the Archfey, Swashbucklers, Martial Arts Adepts, Archers, sort of thing. Just enough to wear the party down a little bit. I mean, anyone can come into this dungeon and start it. So yeah, they might have lost some injuries, they might have lost a few people, and they also might have lost some of their top abilities. So consider that when you're putting them together. Now, some general features about this dungeon are the humidity and the pressure changes that are going to be constantly felt while in this dungeon. As soon as the group start going down the stairs to find the group, they should be feeling the humidity, the dankness, the mank, it's the heat and everything involved because it's in a volcano. They should also constantly feel pressure changes. Like even when they go up to doors, especially when they're going out to that east wing, that they should feel the door rattle as pressure pushes upon it. It should be hinting that there's something going on here the whole way, particularly as they get closer and closer to that geyser room. Room number 7. Now remember that the group are slowed down if they're wading through water, so they're slowed down by a third, or you could just make it 5 or 10 foot, just a flat number. Either way, as long as people realise that they've got to do that silly kick their legs up as they're running through water to get somewhere quickly, I think the group will get it, and it's going to be very hard to sneak without making noise, so potentially some disadvantage on sneak while they're in the water. Random encounters. Now, as I said, the random encounters, if you're looking at a dungeon ecology, raises more questions than potentially answers. Like, how did these things get here? Where are they been hanging out? What are they? You can't go past the acid here. You can't go past the kelpies up there, and you can't go past the magnetic room. So there's questions. But this is a funhouse dungeon, so dungeon ecology doesn't actually matter. It's just for fun to put the group through challenges. So if you're happy to do that, do that. If you want to change the random encounters to adventuring parties that are also trying to get in, that could be vicious, malicious, good, or badly aligned, then I think that adds something a little bit more interesting to the group and allows your PCs to die and then come back with a new PC in another party. The weapons. So the weapons are meant to be brought back. You can find these legendary weapons on the DMG on pages 216 to 218. These weapons, your characters aren't going to give them back. They're just going to hold on to them. It says they're going to get hunted down, but if the group are going to think, like, if their guards couldn't get through the thing we had to get through and we leveled up out of it, how are they going to get into us when we can just kill them all with these powerful weapons that we now own? So that's not going to work. What I decided to do was promise the group anything they wanted. They want a +3 weapon, they can have a normal +3 weapon, I don't care. Because a lot of them won't use some of these weapons. A trident, a hammer, and a greatsword aren't the most common weapons that parties are going to use. So they may not have no use for that. A short sword or a long sword, yeah, alright. Maybe a staff, yeah, now we're talking. So tell the group that they can have whatever they want. They're more likely to return the weapons then and complete the quest as opposed to keep it and just run off. So if you're thinking of bringing it into your campaign, because those weapons could outbalance things. At least if you give them a staggered down weapon and some gold, they might be happy with that. Or a magic carpet, or whatever they want. It's going to be better than these weapons. Making sense of this. So if you need this to be a dungeon and not to be a funhouse dungeon, then you are going to potentially have to make some small adjustments to ask the questions, who feeds these creatures? The module suggests Snarler and Burkett do it from rooms 12 and 13, but neither of these have any ability to gain food from anywhere or create food and water. So this potentially needs to be addressed. So in the novel, people arrive with food and just keep bringing food in every day to second day, which your group could take advantage of if they're going to have long rests and things like that. They're going to see these people who are coming in food and follow them, how they get past some things, which raises how do they get past the frictionless room? Simple way is give Snarler the ability or Bucket to magically create food. And so they've just got to get around because they're regulars and they know how to get past things. they will set up or bring boards to get across the frictionless trap, or ropes, or things like that, because they know it's what they do every time. And then they summon food, feed all the creatures, all the guards, all the men, all the big crab, all this sort of stuff, and everyone keeps churning over while the dungeon clicks over, waiting for people to come in. So there's that. Probably the best way, I think, of doing that is just have some magic create food and water, or otherwise delivery systems are going to be challenging, and to have your group not take full advantage of it. So when you get into Snarla and Burkett's room, make sure Snarla has a full magic book with creating food, spells, scrolls, or a special wand that can do it if it's not going to upset your party balance and you're not going to worry about survivalism. Entry into the dungeon. When it comes to entering, there is a glyph of warding, I believe, on the door that's buried in mud that can't be found. Now, if someone's coming in and feeding these things every day, the mud build-up can't be more than a little bit. And there should be tracks, and it should be somewhat obvious that people are getting in and out this way. So people should be able to survival their way to find it. If not, then I usually just start in the dungeon and just story hand wave all the bits from... We role play that as to the story of how we got there, then we travel and travel and travel, and we find the place, and then I just say we disarm the trap, and you do it by doing this. And this triggers them to think, all right, there's traps here, by telling them. See if they pay attention. And then they go down the stairs, and I start it once they get into the dungeon. They step foot into that 1 foot deep water. That works. If you want them to search a mountain and things like that, well, go for it. I'd rather more fun than tedium, but as long as if you can make it something, make it something. Get them into the dungeon, get them going, describe the place, and the group should be ready to get into it. Room 2, the Sphinx. This female Sphinx is brought to life in the novel White Plume Mountain by the series that follows the Justicar. Listening and reading the audiobook is a great way to find out a little bit more about this dungeon, or certainly someone's impression who's gone through it with a thorough comb. If you want to build upon the book's lore, the Sphinx's name is Enid, and she's been magically compelled to stay there and hold people from coming through for a month. She has to challenge them to a riddle before allowing them to enter. So whenever my group come in, I have the Sphinx quickly stand up, shake herself up, and try and look as regal as she can, and then pose a riddle to the group. At this point, I would definitely make sure that you have a number of riddles. You're probably going to need about 3 or 4, because if the group want to leave the dungeon, sleep outside, then come back in again, they're going to have to go for another riddle. So, have a few riddles. Next one, write them down. Some people just can't hear it. They need to sit there and read and to comprehend and study, especially if you want them to have a fair go at enjoying it. Because if you just say it, and they miss it, and they just switch off, they're just going to sit there the whole time switched off and go, listen, I can't remember the riddle. And they're not going to join and participate. They're just going to sit back and let someone else solve it, which reduces the amount of people who can actually be handy in it. The other one is that I would potentially preload everyone and say, hey, listen, about to say a riddle. If you get it instantaneously, can you please give the others 2 or 3 minutes to have a fair crack at thinking it and trying to figure it out, rather than you just blurting it out. It'll be much more fun. Everyone will have a much more engaging time if you allow people to at least have a think about it, rather than you going, I know this one, it's time, or mankind, or whatever. Give them a fair crack so that everyone can actually have a guess at it, or a think about it before someone then says, after a certain time, because you don't want to just make a whole game of this, give the answer and go again. Room 3. Now, the point of this is to challenge the party to think how to get past the acid without just hit point loss. And I have had groups that are just going to run through and take the hit point loss. Honestly, if that's their solution, go with it. If they come up with anything else, because that is the challenge, think dynamically about how you can get past this acidic water that's going to go for I don't know how long. One of my parties threw fire spells at the walls and then kicked off the wall and parkoured their way down there, which I made them do a few athletics checks. They needed to get rid of the slime off the walls, or otherwise they'd be disadvantaged to slide into it, so they had to burn the walls to dry it up, and that allowed them to get the friction to kick off the wall. In the novel, the characters wrap rope around their legs as a sacrificial layer to lose to the acid, and they ran through. Honestly, there's so many ways you could do that, and the If the characters come up with something that is plausible and interesting, it's the right thing. Let them do that. Now, green slime can be found on the DMG, in the DMG on page 105, if you're looking for that. Room 4, the glass globes. This was written for the room, has no way, the way it's been written has no way to reset the room. So half the party go in and trigger it, and half the party are out. There is no way to solve it until everything's been, almost effectively, everything's been smashed, because they're not going to guess which one it's in pretty quickly. Find the key and get out. So what I would consider adding, and I believe the novel did it as well, is a reset switch some 20-30 feet down the corridor, which resets the trap. Or else, how else do Snarler and that come down, reset the trap, drag the bodies out, give the bodies to whoever they're feeding, and then allow the traps and things to be reset for the next group to come along. So it needs a reset method, or it doesn't make sense. Funhouse Dungeon, though, doesn't matter. This also means that some of your people who are just locked out of the room actually get to participate and do something, rather than just stand outside calling out and whispering good luck. You know, locking people out of the game is something I really try to avoid, so it's worth doing. That means if everyone gets locked in, they've still got to solve it. If someone's locked out, then they got to play with the door and things like that. And honestly, the air elemental and the shadows are probably the biggest challenge for the running away, since the air elemental's movement, and the slimes, the ooze just can't keep up, so they'll be able to run that if they need to. As for attacking the globes, don't bother with their AC and things like that. What happens if they miss? They're just going to swing again. So they swing, they smash, they destroy the thing. I've had the group try to explore the things, get them down, try and figure it out. Finally decide they're going to pin the door, which, okay, if they pin the door, they've taken efforts to... You know, I didn't have it slam closed because they thought about it. And then they just started smashing globes and things coming down and started battling the creatures. And they had a pretty good time with that. Now, one thing I want to talk about at the end of this room was the ring. The ring was an item made to inspire PvP, to try and score more points or less points amongst the group, to separate the groups, because this was a competition module where a whole bunch of people were brought in over the weekend, individually put together, thrown into a team, and told to go forth, and there's a winner at the end of the weekend. So not everyone's going to be working together for the group. They're going to be working for the individual. So this is what this was to inspire, a bit of PvP and people fighting amongst themselves for something that does nothing in the end. If you don't like that option, or don't want your group to go back to PvP because you just got them to stop, then potentially change the ring to something else. It can telepathically talk and say, hey, I can do all this magic stuff. But then when you put it on, that little bit of life that it takes is it biting a finger off, and then the finger and the ring drop into the water. You pull it back up, and then you take the ring off, and then the ring says, oh, yeah, sorry about that. That was that bit of life I had to take. Couldn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't do it. But you can put me back on again now, and I'll give you all those powers. You put the ring back on, it bites and takes another finger back off again. And we'll keep doing this over and over until the group realises it's a cursed ring that just keeps biting your fingers off. So that might be a little bit more fun potentially than such, and it could be something the group could find useful. You never know what players come up with later on in the game. Room 5, the Flesh Golems. So this puzzle, people have argued that my players would never get this. We used to mostly be nerds playing D&D, and this puzzle's usually solved pretty quickly, actually. And I've even had some groups guess it right, but go with the wrong answer because they thought something else. But usually it comes up. Usually someone gets prime numbers. Now, why a barbarian in a medieval fantasy would know what prime numbers are? Yeah, I'm with you there. So potentially another sort of math puzzle might be needed. In which case, hopefully I've found a good one, and I think I've got a spare, and I'll post it down in the comments below. But if it doesn't work, rather than necessarily going straight to a fight, if your group's not built as much for combat, potentially the golems are just there to stop them advancing. So maybe they're just going to try and grapple, drag them out, throw them out of the room, and they're just going to kind of like stay there like a gridiron team on defense. And if people have to try and run through, dash through, cartwheel over, slide through the climber up, get around them, and the golems keep trying to grab them, wrestle them back, and throw them outside the room, that could be more of a memorable encounter than just a simple fight with 5 flesh golems, depending on how you want to run your game. The group trying to run in 2 at a time and move around, while golems move to one side, some move to the other, and the other guys going to try and run straight through the middle and get up outside of the room. It could be a whole dynamic thing, which isn't necessarily combat, but skill and challenge and tactics sort of based. And so it could become more memorable than a lot of other rooms in this dungeon if you play it somewhat differently, just because you're doing something a little bit more interesting and not just standard combat. Room 6, the turnstile. Not so much a room, just a thing in the corridor. When I first came across this as a player, I was really concerned that there was an ambush on the other side, because that turnstile would stop me running back and corner us down a corridor where lightning bolt and other such spells would just finish us off. So this had me concerned, and I made sure the group short rested before we went through the turnstile. But if you've got a rogue or an alchemist or someone who likes fiddling with pieces and mechanisms, there's got to be some way that actually the turnstile operates, but also disengages, so that people can be fed, bodies can be removed, things like that by Snarler and Burkett again. So around the corner, just at the top of the stairs, potentially there needs to be something like a lever, which needs to be pulled and had about 50 pounds of weight put on it. So yeah, Mage Hand won't do it. Just something that disengages the gear so the turnstile can spin two ways. And then when it's disengaged, it'll plop back down again and it'll crank round only in the one direction. This could be interesting for your rogue and artificer to muck around with, or to come up with some way of levering and keeping weight on the lever that's going to be angled down and not hold things well. Maybe they're going to notch the shaft of the lever for a bit, tie some rope, put some weights on it. Like, this is the interesting bits of creativity that really separate D&D from a computer game. So give people the chance to come up with some way of coming up with it. Failing that, I mean, they are just iron spikes and you can just bash them in. So I think that's what the book suggests. So that'd be one way. Failing that, just let one of your characters look at the mechanisms, try and figure it out. And obviously it's going to be a shaft hidden in the stone in the front and the stone below. But it's going to have some sort of mechanism. It's going to have to disengage so Snarler and they can get in and out of the area because they're managing this dungeon. So something like that I think works pretty well. My group in the last room, just because they won one of the golems, golem came with them, and they eventually used the golem to smash the thing down and break it all up. So yeah, eventually nothing's going to attack them, and eventually it's going to get through. So yeah, they just broke their way in. So that wasn't too bad. Now you could also add a body on the far side that's had its throat torn out, and someone who's got jammed up in the turnstile mechanism if using the other groups are in the dungeon, potentially. You know, they were chased by the vampire. One got its throat torn out. The other one just killed itself, trying to force itself in through the mechanism, sliced himself up, just to show them, like, this is a dangerous mechanism. They're going to have to be careful. Room 7, Geysers and Chains. This room is fine, and I wouldn't change much at all. So don't freak out about characters with natural or magical fly. The group is tier 2, so they should have fly, spider climb, all that sort of stuff. It shouldn't be uncommon. So don't freak out. Some characters want to Tarzan their way across. We had characters who could have been teleported across, and they were just like, no way, this is my time to shine. I'm going to Tarzan across the chains, or I'm going to spin the platform. I'm going to swing from platform to platform and jump and get across, because this is their time to do their acrobatics or athletics checks. So go for it. Let them go for it. We even had flying brooms following the group along as they were doing this, just to catch them on the way out, because that's what they wanted to do, and it was fun and cool. So they did that. Now, as it's written, the Geysers have a 15-minute synchronous piece where they'll simultaneously erupt and give you a 2-3 minute window to get yourself all the way across. Now, if you just look at the rough distances, no one's going to panic. If they stay for long enough, they'll see it, they'll spot it, they'll realise they'll jump across, and there's almost no challenge, especially when people have got all their things going at these levels. But one thing that's probably worth noting is that in first edition, when this was written, a round went for a minute. So you only had 2 rounds to 3 rounds before a geyser would erupt, and you could only get so far. Now, you're also not going to be able to travel 30 feet directly across as a standard movement, because these are platforms and they're suspended in the middle. So when you jump on one side, it's going to tip up and it's going to shake around. You can't go to the other side, it'll tip around. They aren't the easiest of things to clamber across. It's kind of like a Takashi's Castle type activity. You got to swing and get some motion and grab a chain and climb across, and then let that one go and build up some more inertia again and keep clambering around. So this is meant to be a thing. And honestly, if you just time it right, most groups can get across it in 30 seconds worth of rounds. And that's where you need to change the length of time these geysers initiate. And remember that when the pressure changes as people are getting into this area. You know, there's a lot more humidity in the corridor approaching this area. They can feel the pressure changes on the door before they even open, as the door keeps creaking and moving just from the pressure changes in the room. And so I would consider upping the frequency of the geysers to anything as short as 30 seconds and a minute. And that will allow the group, or 30 seconds each, but offset. So they've got to move quick to get to one. You're still going to get covered in some burn in the middle and then rush through to the next one without missing a check. Have a look at that, because otherwise there really isn't much of a challenge if you don't reduce these time frames, because most groups can get through the time frame of the 3 minutes as stands. Room 8, the coffin. Now this is yet another good room, and doesn't need to be changed much at all. The vampire in the darkness, and the room creates the darkness, not the vampire. If I say his name, Stenmir knows the command word to make it happen and have the darkness spring up, and can detect them when they come close, so that's all fine. And I've had groups that just will not go out into the corridor and fight. The melees just keep running. They won't last around without doing anything. Rather than all pull out and wait for the vampire to come to, they just keep running into the darkness. So you can't target. Spells that say you've got to see the creature or see the place you're teleporting to don't work. So it can be a real pain in the ass for a lot of players, especially range characters. When people keep running into the darkness, they're like, oh, just come out so we can all fight him. Good one to get the group to start working together with darkness and things like that. I really enjoyed it. Now, as I said, remember, Stenmir isn't making concentration checks for the darkness, so he doesn't have to worry. But if you're going to dispel it, you're probably looking at a DC somewhere on the lines of about 16, which means it's about a level 6 spell upcast. So the players will need to see if they can bypass that with their Dispel Magics if they're using that. Remember, Dispel Magics is on the Player's Guide on page 234. So check up on those rules, because it's likely someone's going to try and dispel the magic if they've got it up their sleeve. Back to the northern area, we're at room 9 for pool and drain. I wouldn't change much about this. In fact, the drain feature I would leave for coming up on the west wing when we get to that. Room 10, the Kelpies. So Kelpies are great, and I would run this in either one of two ways. One, I would have them be beautiful maidens as such, and they're there to lure people in with drowning. And this will be blindingly obvious for some groups. Or I would consider having the two Kelpies, one posing itself as a beautiful maiden or adventurer, and if they're being drowned and they're struggling, and so while the group are making their way up and they're calling out, help, 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 as they're getting drowned out, the group will just come running in and dive into the water to be heroes and save the drowning other adventurer. And this ties in well with my advice of bringing other adventure parties in the dungeon, so that little things like this work better. Now, once the hero dives in to save, that's when the Kelpie wraps around them and drags them down. Or they struggle, no matter how much the Kelpie, help me, Kelpie, pull me to the surface. The Kelpie's actually pulling them down, not pulling them up, and they're getting pulled down with them. Now, drowning is unlikely to happen, because the rules for it on Player's Guide in the Player's Book 183 and 198, there is so much time for drowning, it's really not going to be an issue for most players. Most fights don't last that long, so go for it. It's not going to be a big problem. I would add a few more Kelpies, just because 2 isn't a lot, especially if you've got a big party. I had 4 Kelpies, and then when they're getting beaten down, the Kelpie will just run away and just pose as seaweed. It's got a survival mechanism in it, and once it blends into seaweed, it's just not going to come out of its seaweed form, and the group are just going to have to either leave it or just kill every bit of seaweed in there. So I would run that of 2 different ways there, and that worked pretty well. Room 11, Spinning Cylinder. No change here, but if the PCs are sliding through a spinning cylinder, they may not necessarily come out on the bottom. They may come up on the wall by the time they inertia and things, friction, spin them slightly. So consider that. Also, if you happen to have a monk, goddamn, hope that monk's in there, because if he catches that flaming arrow that's meant to set the whole thing on fire, then because of his ability to snatch missile weapons, go for it. That'd be their one moment to shine. Let them have it. That'd be fantastic. In my last group, we had a turtle and another character, and they just came running along, threw the turtle on, jumped on, and just surfed the turtle through the spinning piece. So they were thrilled before the flaming arrow did too much. And someone else had already got through, so they just sort of came and just cleaned them up as they were trying to unpick the door. And with the standard PCs getting in the way of each other and having a good time. Enjoy those moments. It's a fantastic dungeon. You'll have heaps of them in this game. Room 12, Burkett's Guard Post, no change. Don't have to do too much. Room 13, Snarla's Sanctum, no big change. But remember, Snarla is feeding the Kelpies and the other denizens of this dungeon, if you're running with what I've suggested. So make sure, as I said, there's plenty of food in there, as without it, it doesn't make sense. In the novel, has the Sphinx says that, yeah, there are delivery parties that arrive and bring food, and the group never actually went down this far or into this particular place, so they omitted that in their story. So yeah, just give Snarla either a magic item or a heap of spells that just keep getting delivered, and she just casts Create Food and brings it out to everyone in the dungeon. For room 14, the flood doors, no change. Make sure you describe how they're inset, and maybe there's leather around the areas and it's designed to make a seal, and these are very different style doors, so they shouldn't be able to figure it out, but as soon as they get into the next room and they start clicking, they should realise that, yeah, those are flood doors. So make sure you describe what you would imagine those flood doors would be. For the room 15, the Boiling Lake, I'm sure some groups end up here. It had to be written in there in case, so it's all good. And up to room 16, the Blowhole, no change. If your group go that way, I haven't had a group do it yet, so I've been waiting, but I haven't had a group do it yet. For room 17, the Boiling Bubble, this is a great environment and monster, except that the room is just blank. There's nothing for the monster to hide upon, and they should see it from a distance and just ping it with spells, which hopefully, if it's that far away and they range kill it, and then the flood starts coming in, hopefully they have enough time to run through the doors and before they all get burnt. So yeah, that could be something. But I put a lot more rocks and some huge shells and made the crab more of a hermit crab. So it comes out of the shell and starts attacking the group. And it was good that they were able to get in and start exploring and be amongst it, and then be being picked up by the claws and stabbed and attacked by others as the creature moves around attacking. That made it a little bit more as the group were jumping up on the large rocks and fighting down and leaping off them onto the crab and riding the crab around and things like that. Like, so much more entertaining than just a blank room. Try and avoid blank rooms whenever you can to make fights more enjoyable and more dynamic. Room 18, the Hall Pit. I've heard people say get rid of it. Why is it there? That don't make sense. It makes sense if there was no water in the dungeon. There probably wasn't meant to be water in the dungeon when it was originally designed. So that drain over in the other areas there. So what I had is I just it's a 10 foot by 10 foot pit by 10 foot. I had spikes down the bottom. But if you just jumped in through the water because you didn't see it, you just fell in. Then if you actually explored, you could find spikes down there and then come back up and realise that, it was a pit trap. And maybe this place isn't meant to be flooded. So I left it as is. Just an interesting little bit of story that builds to it and makes it realise that there was something to this, but nature and environments have changed since. Room 19, the metal heated corridor, or the microwave room. This is a great one for separating the party. The microwave room I love because people sit there and try and solve it and figure it out, and it's something that's engaging and trying to figure it out. And then as soon as they realise no metal, the people in the group that don't have much metal just sort of either throw it down or run down with it and throw it when they can, or put it in bags of holding, or come up with whatever way they're dragging it through the water or some such. Remember that coins are going to burn through the leather pouches. That buckles, so all the straps are going to burn through, and all their straps and clothing are going to potentially drop and unfold. So a few people will have things, unless they specifically have bone ties or some such. But what it does do is when the group have to wait the 10 minutes for the armored people to undo their armor, a lot of them, as quick as it'll go by, will say, I'm not going to hang around for that, and they'll split the party. Then they'll get down the other area and they'll trigger the ghouls, which will come up to in room 10, which will then leave the group split between this microwave room, with some people stuck down at one end, still taking off breastplates and armor and helms, while others are already in a fight down the other end. which will then people have to make a decision. Do I just run through and take the damage, or or how do we get them back? Or come running back through here, or like, it makes it more engaging. And so, by all means, if your party want to wander off and leave the paladin still stripping their armor off, do that. It definitely livens it up and becomes a bit more of a challenge as to what they're going to do in making hard calls on the use of hit points for this game. Now, leading straight into room 20 with the Ghoul Ambushes, as I said, this ties really well into that microwave corridor. But remember, the ghouls aren't that smart with intelligence of 7. And they're definitely not thoughtless, though. So they might change. They might not charge out immediately if they're splashing and nothing visible, such invisible people have gone through. But they also might just join in combat and, really give full points to someone who's going to have brought their steel dagger up, pulled it out, got into a fight, stabbed it into one of these ghouls, left the dagger in, and then pushed them into the microwave area. So the dagger now heats up and starts burning the ghoul on the inside. If players are starting to play like that, using shove actions and things like that, they are really thinking about the environment you're giving them and dynamic ways of playing this game that they can really take advantage of. So encourage that sort of stuff. Like, even like to say that maybe the ghouls already have a couple of metal things in them, some arrow tips and things like that. And if the party realise, they just got to shove them into the corridor and they'll start burning up. Particularly if they're split over 2 areas and they've got very few people up front in the room 20. That could make a really interesting fight that we'll talk about some other ones coming up soon as well. Room 21, stairs up, no change, they're just stairs, I don't know why it's a room. And this leads us into room 22, the frictionless trap. This is another along the lines of how do you want to do this style of puzzle? There's no particular set way of solving, but if it sounds convincing, then it's probably about right. So the biggest one I run this is if you decide to run up and jump over the pit and land, you're going to have to make an athletics check to not fall over, and then you continue moving at a certain speed to get yourself across. Now, depending on how fast they were trying to get across and where they were jumping, you're going to have to make a call. If they're just trying to jump over and land on the other side, they're going to slip and then just slowly glide their way to the other end where they potentially fall in again. If the other party can lasso them and rescue them and pull them back and then drag them up before they fall into the spike pit and get super tetanus, awesome. If they come up with other ways, let's go with it. One of my group, they took the door off and started splitting the boards up. Then put the boards across the gap. They tied a rope to the doorway. They had a character get themselves across because flight doesn't work. Slide across and then jump or misty step them across. Tie onto the other door handle. Then they brought more of the door up and built 2 bridges over the gaps, and they just had to pull themselves along on the rope. When they got to the frictionless bit, their legs slipped out from them, but they could just pull themselves along on the rope and they got themselves across, and they were able to get past that trap in a way that was creative, using the area around them, and they succeeded. And it was really good. But as I said, if your group just want to jump across, land, slip over, make a athletics check to see if they can remain standing, slide across and give another athletics check at the other end to see if they can kick themselves up from a prone position to just at least grab on and get half their body on the other edge to clamber across. Super tetanus is fun, but giving people another crack at something is also good, especially if the other group are throwing ropes and lassos and trying to save their buddy and then discover how this room works. It gets really creative. Put a dead body on the far side in the pit trap, just to show that people had come this way and had failed it. And when they do get to the other end, potentially they find another body and we didn't fall for that, we succeeded. Room 23, the floating stream. Now, the first time I came into this, I just noped my way out of that. I was like, nah, I don't like that at all. Second time I was a player in this, I was like, oh yeah, we're doing it this time. I was a lizard folk, so I could hold my breath, so I wasn't concerned about how long it would take me to chance on drowning, so I was into it. Dove in, ran around, got slaughtered pretty badly by the guards, came back round for another pass. So here's some ways to make this battle a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more interesting that players can even take advantage of. I know we started. So you've got to give them water an initiative count move. So figure out which way it's going. I think it's looking for the bird's eye view this way. And then on initiative count 20 and 10, have everyone in the water stream move in that direction. 15, 20 feet, whatever you decide. So if they just sit there the water will move them round. If they swim and the water moves them round, they'll be shooting through even faster. This became really interesting because once we got into the next room, we started shoving people into the water and the water took them away. Room 24, Sir Bluto's guard post. So give some sign that there are people in here and occupying and live their time. So let's put some tables in there with cards on it, some bedding, a few things. People live here. So there's probably a toilet bucket. And someone's got to get food to them somehow through the secret passageways, how Snarla brings them their food. Make it interesting. Make it a lived-in space and make them use the stream to both their and the player's advantage to let people get carried away, quite literally. So Bluto does have a backstory. He was a respected member of the aristocracy nobles, and it was discovered that he murdered 8 children from Greyhawk's richest families in a bizarre sacrificial rite referred to as the River of Blood Murders, because that's how they were found, because of the river of blood coming out. So my DM, when he ran this for me, he said they were cannibals and ran them like that, and that worked pretty well. But these guards can put down some hefty damage when groups come through these things. Once we'd been through once and knew the guards were there, we went back in again after a retreat and a rest. This time we rode the kayaks and used them as cover, so only half the guards could attack us. And then we kicked the kayaks out onto another guard and leapt from the stream and crash tackled other guards, and we made it a real rumble. And then every time a guard had come anywhere near my character, he just pushed them into the stream, and they'd go taking off to reduce the amount of people we had to fight. So you should know as a DM how long it takes to go around this, and which is why I definitely say the water needs to have a movement speed, which in case it shifts people around. Room 26. The terraced aquarium. This is the inverted ziggurat. This is the trademark room for this whole dungeon, and I wouldn't change it at all. It is a fantastic thing that's killed me many times. And the one thing I would do, though, is the description. You need to give players photos of the pictures. The side cut from the old edition needs to be placed in there. Both the old version and the new version potentially to see, because this isn't easily understood. So potentially draw a side cut version, show the photos, make sure everyone understands exactly how this area looks. Even potentially a bird's eye view if it helps. Because it's not easy to understand with height and all the barriers and everything. You can even grab some screenshots from a bloke called Wyloch. Wyloch's Armory. He physically built this. So in a 28 millimeter scale. I'll put a link for his channel down below in his video. He builds all these old dungeons and takes them around for cons and conventions and such. So definitely good for some visual aids to understanding what's going on. One thing you do have to think about is where can the characters get cover from the manticores? Now, hopefully I'm putting up a picture about some direct fire shots and where the manticores can actually hit bad guys, so the good guys. But you've also got to consider these tail spikes probably don't go direct. They probably lob, so they'd have an arc that they're going to follow, which is going to give it a little bit more ability to hit creatures, but you're also probably going to have to think, where can they get cover from how much? Now, I draw this little piece up to see if I can figure out exactly what it's going to look and where I'm going to give cover. And so I potentially, I would allow the manticores to fire on that north-south axis, but not east-west, because the angles are too sharp for them to really get it in quite fairly down there. I also think if you're crouching on the top platform, this will give you full cover, where if you're standing up next to the water, fighting the crawfish, maybe you're only getting half cover from the manticores. So make sure you have a look at the cover there. Also, for your fire spells, make sure you know where your rules are for for fighting in water. For a quick reference for yourself, if something is fully submerged, rules is written, you get fire resistance when magical fire goes off around you. So half damage for things there. Also, I want you to have a plan for when the water panels break. How fast is water pouring out into the next level down below? This is 5th ed, so I wouldn't go too complex. But I would be thinking along the lines of water will drop about 2 foot around per broken panel on that level, down to the bottom where, let's just say, it gets down to like 1 foot, and then it just kind of stops because it's just the pressure behind it is just enough to force it out quickly. In which case I would then have the layer it's filling into fill up at about 3 feet per round, just because it's smaller than the level before it. And then there's water, obviously, at the very end that's going to spill over into the next layer again, particularly if the further panels haven't been broken. Come up with something simple, something that's going to work, not too complex. Don't work out the exact volume and work it all out. No one's going to give a damn. It's fantasy reality, and it's just there to be enjoyed. One thing I did forget, which you shouldn't, is to don't forget that there are drains and force barriers that stop things going into room 27. And down the bottom where the manticores are, it will fill up, but it will drain slowly away. So don't forget about that, because it's how the dungeon's actually designed. For room 27, the luxurious prison, Questsniff can be fun to play with, but he will be suspicious as hell if you don't have other adventuring parties coming into the dungeon. Once again, back to my tinker by having other adventuring parties coming through this dungeon, or before or during while the characters are in it. And just simply say he was the last thief left of his group, and they knocked him unconscious and left him here, and he's just been enjoying himself. Why would he want to leave? Things are nice here. He's getting fed, and he's got a very comfortable place to hang. So, yeah, and I guess he might as well leave with the party, since they're leaving probably with a lot of the good stuff. So that will make his story a lot more believable than just having him there. And hopefully you'll be able to catch your group off guard when he finally does attack. Getting out. Now, the way this is meant to be done is that once the party have got most of the weapon systems and things like that, awesome weapons, and they are going to get out, that's when they are spoken to, and 2 Afriti step out, and they challenge the party. Now, if the party haven't taken a long rest because you haven't been using random encounters to challenge them when they weren't expecting, because they think behind them's clear, they're probably not going to long rest again, and they're just going to walk out of the place on almost 0 hit points and just get smashed by these 2 Afriti. Consider changing this, because 2 Afriti, like, these are no joke. Like, they've got like 200 hit points, good AC, they're a CR 11, they've got spells and good attacks, and if your party are weak, they're just going to get smushed. So, to prep your party, you need to make sure you give them random encounters to trigger them, to make them think they can't just get out of this thing easy. Potentially they'll at least take a short rest after finishing their last area. And then they start making their way out. Now, if it looks like they're beating these 2 Afriti, another 2 Afriti come out and start bashing them up and beating them up. And this is just going to kill most players. It was a challenge, or a competition module. It's meant to get right down to the last person who survives or dies. So that doesn't work well if this is put into your campaign. I'd also consider changing it, being that we still don't know what happened to Caraptus. He set this whole thing up, he left notes, you hear his voice, you hear everything, but where is he? What is he? Why don't we know anything about him? Why don't we finish with Caraptus? I would make Caraptus a demi-lich. Now, you could get rid of the Afriti and just have the skull, the demi-lich, come down, challenge the party, and fight the party. That will be possibly doable if they're rested up and they're prepared and they're ready to hit something again. Failing that, the group could just run past and leave him and let one person suffer his wrath. Spring this on them if they're trying to leave with maybe Afriti if they're trying to leave with 2 or more weapons. That'll make them stay and rest inside the dungeon. They can possibly get out with 1 weapon, but if they've got 2 weapons, they're free to jump out, and at the very end, if they're trying to leave with all 3, that's when the demi-lich comes out to challenge them. I think that might be a better way of going about it. It also explains how he's so old, and yet his personality or his mind is still here. He's a demi-lich. It makes sense. And it could be another tough fight, but I think it kind of wraps it all up. And it's a better payoff than simply and closes the loop, rather than just having them hold off to the slave dungeons or whatever. Particularly if this is a campaign that you're putting in. Don't do that. That would suck big time. So what did I think of this adventure? I love it. I think it's a great funhouse dungeon. I think it's cool. There are many others that are very much like it, and I've designed a few funhouse dungeons myself, where each room is just there to challenge the players in different ways. This is probably one of the most famous, and the fact that it just keeps coming back is just testament to the fact that how good it really is. Great challenges, good fights, good skill to get a good thinking dungeon. It's got a lot going for it, really does. The only things, as I said, you've got to concern yourselves about is getting out, if you're going to run it raw. The weapons are absolutely legendary, and players aren't going to give them up. And I guess that kind of it. All in all, I rate this highly. I've run it. I've been a player many times. I've ran it a few times, and I'm currently planning right now to run it for in person and online for 2 different groups. So it is a popular one of mine, and I'm quite taken by it. I hope you like the art, and I can only strongly recommend you make sure that if you're running this, you Google through the art, or if you're doing it online, or you print it all off. Get some printed off, hand it out to the group. Handouts are fantastic. Players love them. And it'll help people get an understanding of what the rooms are and what's going on. Some people need pictures, some people need words, some people need to read it. Pictures will help. So picture says 1,000 words. Hey, if you've hung around this long, thanks for listening to my advice on running White Plume Mountain. I do a lot of other adventure reviews, subclass reviews, and things like that. Go check them out. I've got affiliate links. We've got a whole number of things down there in the text box below me. Check them out. Lots of other videos. Like and subscribe and all that other YouTube stuff. And hey, I'll catch you again for the next one. See you around.